welcome to Miss Rose's Story Time. We are in The Bronze Bow by Elizabeth George Speare, and we left off chapter 20. So if you have your books or your ebook, please turn to chapter 20. Okay, I don't know if your libraries have reopened or not yet since March, but we shall see how things continue. I hope everyone's doing well. Hope you are taking care of yourself and each other and reading at least 30 minutes every day, 6 days a week at least, or 7. All right, so we're going to read chapter 20, and we might read more than that, see how much we can get read in 30 minutes, okay? With pausing when there's commas and periods, and reading with expression and emphasis, not just speed reading to get so many words done, but to be able to comprehend and enjoy what we're reading. Okay, page 212. The month of Tishrei brought the first autumn rains. The parched brown fields dark in the moisture. The soil fell back, dark red behind the plow, rich for the fall sowing. In the roads after a sudden shower, the puddles shone like pools of melted lead. There were no meetings in the watchtower now. The boys of the band moved cautiously, not daring to be seen too frequently with each other. Soon they whispered as they passed. They would begin again. They would build up once more their store of weapons. They would make ready for the day to come. But there was no eagerness in the whispers. They knew in their hearts that the day would not be soon. They had lost faith in the mountain. In the streaming dismiss of his shop, Daniel labored to the limits of each day's strength. Unable to lift the hammer, he filled his time with light tasks, filling, smoothing, and polishing, trying to ignore the pain in his shoulder. He cursed the pile of untouched work. He longed to beat a wall of furious sound against his own thoughts. At night in the roof shelter he now shared with Jonkin, he drew his cloak over his head and fell into an exhausted slumber. But always during the long hours he woke to the slashing of rain, and then the pain could not be ignored, and the thoughts were louder than ever. In the darkness, the same words echoed over and over. They who live by the sword will perish by the sword. At first he could not recall where he had heard those words. They did not sound like Joel's scriptures. Then he remembered. Jesus had spoken them on a hot summer morning under the blue sky. Daniel had not questioned the words. To live by the sword was the best life he knew. To take the sword for his country's freedom and to perish by it, what better could a man hope for? He had taken the sword, but Samson, instead, had perished by it. Who had no freedom to gain, and Nathan, who had left behind a bride, their deaths were on his head, and freedom was farther away than before. Without the help of Jonkin, he could not have managed. The boy who had come back to the village with him could not do enough to prove his gratitude. Having never in all his memory had a house to live in, Jonkin was not at all troubled that he could not enter Simon's house. He was content to eat his meals in the shop or on the doorstep, where he could greet the passerby. Far from missing the freedom of the mountain, he took naturally to village life. He went cheerfully every morning to the well for water, shrugging off the good-natured jibes of the girls. He delivered the work, making new friends everywhere with his jagged-toothed grin. Daniel's customers took the boy for a new apprentice and praised his willingness, though they doubted that with his puny arms he could ever make a blacksmith. 9 days had gone by since Joel and Thacia had returned to Cape Rim, and no word had come from them. Day after day his friend's silence grew heavier to bear. Was Joel in danger? What were Joel's thoughts in that night? Did he regret now the vow he had taken? Had the feel of the Roman chains shaken his purpose? Late one evening, as he was about to climb to the rooftop, there was a knock on the door of the shop. Lighting a second saucer of oil, Daniel went through the house door and drew back the bolt. A stranger, heavily muffled in a dripping cloak, pushed in quickly and shut the door behind him. With a rush of thankfulness, Daniel saw that it was Joel. He could only clasp his friend's hand without speaking. "Did you think I wouldn't come?" Joel asked with surprise. It seemed wiser to wait. You are watched?" "I'm afraid so. I've been out only once on the Sabbath. Coming home from the synagogue with Father, I met a steward of the centurions. He recognized me, but I think he was not sure, so Father couldn't let me go out again." "Your father knows?" "I couldn't keep it from him any longer. I told him everything about the passageway and the meetings and my part in Rosh's work. I owed Father that, Daniel, when I saw how he had grown older in those 2 days." Joel had grown older too. His face had a new purpose. "How he must despise me," Daniel said with shame. "For saving me? He sent you a message. He says you are not to hide in the passageway again. You are to come to the house whenever you like. In a way, I wish he hadn't tried so hard to forgive us. It would have been easier tonight." "Tonight?" "I left without telling him. I'm not going back if I can't stay here with you. I'll go to the mountain and join Rosh." In a burst of relief and joy, Daniel forgot every doubt. How could he thought that Joel wouldn't forget his vow? Now, working together, they could accomplish anything. The band would go on again, stronger than before, but almost at once a new doubt clouded out his pleasure. "Why did you leave home, Joel? The band has never asked that of anyone." "I can't stay at home. Father is terrified to let me go out the door. I knew he was making some plan. Then today he told me I was to go to Jerusalem tomorrow morning with a friend of his. He has arranged for me to study in a school there, so I had to get away quickly." Daniel stood looking at his friend, his mind troubled. "School in Jerusalem?" he asked soberly. "Isn't that what you always wanted?" Joel did not quite meet his eye. "I used to," he admitted. "That was before we started the band." "Don't you still want it?" "I want to work for the victory. I vowed to. If you can't have me, if it isn't safe, then I'll go to the mountain." "Rosh is no longer our leader," said Daniel. Joel hesitated, then said very earnestly, "You must not break with Rosh because of me." "It would have happened anyway," Daniel answered. "I've had a lot of time to think these past days. Somehow we've been going in the wrong direction. The things we've been doing for Rosh weren't what we planned when we started the band. Attacking people on the road, especially our own people, isn't going to bring the day any closer. We haven't weakened Rome at all. We've only weakened ourselves instead. We have lost Nathan and Samson. We almost lost you." Joel was silent a moment. "A new leader will come," he said. "We must go on making ready." "Yes," said Daniel. Hearing Joel say it had but given him back the hope he had almost lost. Now he was able to say the thing he knew he must say. "But until he comes, Joel, you must go on studying. That's what you are suited for. When the day comes, we're going to need more than farmers and laborers. We'll need the priests and the scribes too, and you can win them over because you understand them." Joel had never been able to hide his thoughts. Now he could not conceal the hope that sprung into his eyes. "That's what Thesia said," he admitted. "Are you sure you mean this, Daniel?" "I'm sure." "What will the others think? They have chosen me leader." Joe thought for a minute. "I like to do it for Father's sake, too," he admitted finally. "He's a good man, Daniel. You can't know how good he is because you've only seen his narrow side. I know that I have hurt him. He wanted to be proud of me, a son who died for Israel, even a zealot. He could be proud of that. But the day on the road with the chains on, I knew that I had left him nothing, nothing at all to be proud of. Now you and Samson and Nathan have given me another chance. I'll never forget that. I'll do my best to make it up for it. Can you get back safely tonight?" "I think so, but there are some things I must say first. For one thing, I brought a gift from Thesia to Leah. She won't be able to come here alone. Right now she's forbidden to leave the house at all." "Leah will be grateful," Daniel managed, trying to hide his dismay. Jill hesitated. "Do you think Leah would let me give it to her myself?" he asked. "You can try," Daniel answered doubtfully. "She has seen you often through the door." He opened the door to the house. Leah, sitting in the lamplight, raised her golden head. "Jill has brought you a gift from Thesia," he said. He waited. Behind him, Jill stood quietly in the doorway. Leah seemed to shrink into a tight mold of fear. He could see her quiver, but she did not move, only watched with terrified blue eyes. "Thesia sent her greetings," Joe spoke very gently. "She asks you not to forget her, and she will come to see you as soon as she can." He reached out and softly laid a packet on the chest near the door. Then he backed into the shop and Daniel followed him. "You realize," Daniel said with wonder, "that you're the only person who has made inside that door ever except for your sister?" "Thesia told me to try. Leah is very lovely, Daniel. I wish Thesia sent you a message too, by the way." Daniel felt his cheeks grow hot. 4 days from today is the Day of Atonement. First the fast, of course, and then the service at the synagogue. Why, I never thought I'll see it at the temple in Jerusalem. I can't believe it, but I'll miss the festival here in Capernaum. The girls will dance and sing in the vineyard. Will you come to town for it?" "I wouldn't know how to behave," Daniel protested. "Think it over. It would please Thesia. Now the other thing is about Leah. Thesia and I want you to know that you never need to be worried about leaving her, because we will take care of her. When the day comes, if you ever have to go away, Thesia will come, or even better, we would like to have Leah safe in our own house." He hurried on while Daniel groped for words to thank him. "Thesia is very fond of Leah. She'll miss her. Thace is going to be lonely, I'm afraid." Daniel looked down at his hands. "Father regrets now that he's allowed her so much freedom to go about with me. Thace is spoiled. She isn't used to staying at home the way most girls do." "It will be like caging a wild bird from the mountain," Daniel thought. Joe looked away, then into a far corner of the shop. "Father wants to arrange a marriage for her," he said. Daniel was not even aware that his hands reached out or that his knuckles whitened around the hammer handle. "There is an old friend of the family," Joel went on, "but Thesia won't hear of it. It puts Father in a hard position because no matter how he regrets it, he is bound by his own promise. You see, it's different with our family. When our mother was only 8 years old, she was betrothed. But when she was 15, my father, who was a poor student, came to do some work in her father's library, and they fell in love. It caused a terrible uproar. Her father was furious. He had to get divorce papers from the boy she had never even laid eyes on. She had father promise each other then that they would never arrange marriages for their children against their will, and they would let us choose for ourselves. Daniel did not dare look at his friend. The trouble is, Joel said, Daisy is 16 years old and she refuses to choose. Still, Daniel could not look up. He knew that Joel had spoken straight from his heart with the impulsive frankness that would always be Joel's way. But he too, that his friend's loyalty he knew too that his friend's loyalty had always blinded him to the truth. She must choose, he burst out now too harshly, someone of her own kind. Your father is right, and you will have to choose too before long. And you, Joel said quietly, I have no choice. How can a man who is sworn to vengeance and death take a wife? The angry words echoed in a silence that neither of them could seem to break. One more thing, Joel said finally with an effort. It is Jesus. Somehow he must be warned. He has enemies everywhere. You mean Herod's men? Asked Daniel, relieved that Joel had turned to a safe subject. He knows about those. I mean the elders of the synagogue, the rabbis and the scribes. They can't understand him. They're furious at the things he says and does. He too free with the law. They say he is trying to destroy all the authority of the temple. Some of them even say he is in league with the devil. Does it matter what they say? Jesus pays no attention. He must pay attention now. Some of them hate him so much, I think they would kill him if they could. Will you try to warn him? Simon says he has been warned time and time again. Go to see him, Daniel. I wish, but it's too late for me now. Perhaps we made a mistake. Maybe Jesus is really the leader we're waiting for. Then he straightened his shoulders and held out his hand. Don't forget the festival, anyway, he said. Thais will be looking for you. The two clasped hands. For God's victory, they said. Then Joel drew his cloak about his face and went out into the darkness. It is the end of everything, Daniel thought, looking at the closed door. The end of everything we worked for. For the first time, he despaired that the day would never come. Chapter 21. It was good of you to come, Daniel, but do you think Jesus does not allow this? Annoyed, Daniel looked back at Simon. He had walked all the way from the village at the end of the long day's work. Twice a slanting rush of rain had drenched him to the skin, and the night air, heavy with fog, had only chilled him and not dried the clothing that clung to his body. He had fought his way through the tattered crowd in the garden, and now that he had reached the door, they refused to let him approach Jesus. The teacher, they explained, was conferring with an important man who had come all the way from Jerusalem to question him. Now Simon brushed off Joel's urgent warning with no more than a shrug. Forgive me, Daniel, Simon said now, seeing that he had offended his young friend. We are worried too. These priests from Judea, they haven't given him a moment's peace for 3 days. They pretend to be so respectful, and they're only trying to trap him into saying something they can prove his blasphemy. It keeps us all on edge. Why does he stay here if he knows he is in danger? Why doesn't he hide till he's strong enough? The people need him. Come another time, Daniel. I cannot talk tonight. With the door shut against him, Daniel stood in the crowded garden. He wanted desperately to see Jesus. He knew now that the warning had been only an excuse. If he could have one word, one sign from Jesus, he might find the strength to go on working. For a long time he waited, lost in his misery. Finally, Andrew came to the door of the house and looked out. "No use to wait," he called to the wretched crowd. "The master is very weary. He can see no one else tonight." A wailing filled the garden. Then gradually the sick and the lame, convinced that the man had meant what he said, began to hobble back towards the road. A few simply settled themselves on the damp ground, having no other place to spend the night. Presently the door opened again, and Simon and Andrew and Jesus came out into the garden. They moved slowly, and Jesus spoke kindly to those who obstructed the way, touching them sometimes with a pitying hand. Firmly the two disciples pushed a way for their master to the outside staircase that led up to the upper room. They stood watching till Jesus, carrying a small night light, ascended to the stairs, went into the shelter, and closed the door behind them. It was dark in the garden when the disciples had gone back into the house. Daniel moved forward and stood at the foot of the staircase. He could not bear to go away. He was sure he had not made any sound, but over his head the door opened. "Who is there?" Jesus spoke. He raised the lamp. Daniel did not dare to speak, but almost without thought he moved into the small circle cast by the lamp and raised his head till the light fell upon his face. "Come up, my friends," said Jesus softly. The upper chamber was completely bare and clean. On the floor was unrolled the thin mattress on which Jesus was to sleep. "Sit down," said Jesus, and he himself sat opposite Daniel on the floor of the rolled earth. "Why are you troubled?" he asked. "I came to warn you," Daniel hurried into his errand. "Joe says you are in danger. He says they have turned against you in the synagogue. He's afraid they will try to kill you." "Thank you," said Jesus gravely. "It is kind of you and Joel. Now tell me, why are you troubled?" Shamed, aware that he could not disturb the master's rest, Daniel sat struggling with his conscience. Then he miserably spilled over. "Because I don't know where to turn. Everything has failed, everything I hope and live for." "What did you live for?" "Just one thing, freedom for my people and vengeance for my father's death." "Two things," said Jesus, "not one." "They are the same. I will strike for both at once." "Are you sure?" Jesus asked. The familiar tightness pulled at Daniel's mouth. He had come for help, not questions. "All I wanted was a chance," he went on. "I thought it had come at last, and I worked and planned for it. Then it all went wrong somehow. All I have is another debt to pay Samson." Jesus was silent for a moment. "The Samson?" he asked. "He was your friend?" The question surprised Daniel. He had thought of Samson as a burden and a symbol of his own weakness. He had never thought of Samson as a friend, but now he saw that it was true. "He died for me. He didn't understand about Israel or the kingdom. He just died without any idea what we were fighting about. Then, heedless on the master's weariness, forgetting everything but the guilt that had tormented him every moment since the day of the rescue, he poured out the story of Rosh, of the betrayal on the mountain, of Nathan's death, and the debt that Samson sacrificed and laid upon him. "Yes," said Jesus slowly, "an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It is so written. We must repay kind, but Samson has given you all that he had. In what kind can you repay him?" "By vengeance." "He did not give you vengeance. He gave you love. There is no greater love than that a man should lay down his life for a friend. Think, Daniel, can you repay such love with hate? It's too late to love Samson. He's probably dead. Then, as Jesus waited, should I love the Romans who killed him? He asked with bitterness. Jesus smiled. You think that it's impossible, don't you? Can't you see, Daniel? It is hate that is the enemy, not men. Hate does not die with killing. It only springs up 100-fold. The only thing stronger than hate is love. The boy lowered his head, scowling at the floor. This was not what he had come to find. With terror, he pushed away the words that struck treacherously into his own weakness. When he looked up again, Jesus sat with his head bowed, one hand across his eyes. Every line of his body showed his urgent need to rest. Daniel felt a stab of conscience, but his own need was too great. He had to speak. I don't understand, he panicked, but I know that you could save us all if you would, Master. Why will you not lead us? There are so many, hundreds, thousands in Galilee who only wait for a word. How long must we wait? Jesus did not seem to have heard. He did not move. Slowly Daniel got to his feet. As his hand touched the latch, Jesus spoke. He had risen too and stood looking after the boy. Daniel, he said, I would have you follow me. Master, a great burst of hope almost swept him to his knees. I will fight for you to the end. Jesus smiled at him gently. My loyal friend, he said, I would ask something much harder than that. Would you love for me to the end? Baffled, Daniel felt the hope slipping away. I don't understand, he said again. You tell people about the kingdom. Are we not to fight for it? The kingdom is only bought at a great price, Jesus said. There was one who came just yesterday and wanted to follow me. He was very rich, and when I asked him to give up his wealth, he went away. I will give you everything I have. Something almost like a twinkle of humor lightened an instant the sadness of Jesus' eyes. Riches are not keeping you from the kingdom, he said. You must give up your hate. Daniel felt himself trembling. He was torn in two. Before the appeal in the man's eyes, he felt the whole fabric of his life about to give away, and the very ground beneath his feet like shifting sand. He summoned all his strength to battle for the thing that was most precious to him. I made a vow before God, he defied Jesus. Is not a vow sacred? Jesus looked at him steadily with a look he knew he would never forget, full of sadness and regret and a deep loneliness beyond any reach. Yes, he said, it is sacred. What did you vow, Daniel? To fight. Daniel stopped, remembering the night in the passage, seeing Joel's face, trying to remember the exact words they had spoken. Thacey's voice came back to him. To live and to die for God's victory. A smile suddenly transformed Jesus' face, the old smile, radiant, full of youth and strength. He put his hand on Daniel's shoulders. That is not a vow of hate, he said. Go in peace, my son. You are not far from the kingdom. That's the end of chapter 21. Okay, so we're just 2 minutes short of 30 minutes. Wow, there was a lot in those 2 chapters. Oh my goodness. Who? Thacia, Leah, Daniel, Joel, Jesus. Mention of Samson, mention of Nathan. What? Oh, Joel getting ready to go to learn in Jerusalem, and Thacia wanting Daniel to come to the party, and meeting Jesus and talking to Jesus about all of his frustrations and concerns and everything, and Leah letting Joel come to the door to be able to give her Thacia's gift, and when. It was that most of it was at night. Where? Oh, gosh, they were talked about Cape Rim, and then they went into the town. And they were talking about the city, and let's see, who, what, when, where, how. Lots of walking and talking and waiting. All right, so I hope you enjoy chapter 20 and 21. We will read some more later. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless you.